cannot, as much as it cannot be earned, it cannot easily be taken away. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, you may
Can you hear
proceed.
me?
Yes, sir. We can
Yes,
hear
you
you.
can. Right.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Right. Fine. Thank you. So human dignity, as I said, cannot be earned and cannot be taken away. It is an inalienable gift given to us by God Himself. And every other good thing in life depends on the safeguarding of our fundamental dignity, isn't it? Now, Immanuel Kant, the famous philosopher and jurist, in central to Immanuel Kant's ethical theory is the claim that all persons are owed respect just because. Why? Because they are persons. They are persons, that is, rational beings. I said 15 minutes ago. Be a person, you will appreciate, is to have a status, and a status that is unlike that of any other kind. We are special, aren't we? So, my dear friends, receiving respect from others is important. Now, I thought it's relevant to talk of this because it's part of human rights. Receiving respect from others is important. How good we feel when we get respected by others. Why? Because it helps us to feel safe and to express ourselves. Being respected by important people in our lives, like growing up, teaches us how to be respectful towards others. As we grow up and we are respected by important people, we in turn, when we get to those places, we respect others. And that's what helps us to grow. Respect in your relationships, my dear friends, builds feelings of trust, feelings of safety, feelings of well being. What then should be done to dignify the nation, our country, our countries? My dear friends, very simply put, listen and support people to express their needs and wants. Very difficult thing to do for those of us who are in positions of power. Respect people's rights to privacy. Ensure people are able to complain without fear of retribution. Engage with family members and carers as care partners. The next question I can ask is, what is respect in human values, in human rights? Respect, my dear friends, is an overreaching consideration and represents recognition of each human being's intrinsic value. What we recognize is the intrinsic value of a human being. Respect involves honoring the rights, privacy, dignity, entitlements, and the diversity of those contributing to the community. My dear friends, human dignity is the recognition that human beings possess a special value, as I said, intrinsic to their humanity, and as such are worthy of respect simply because they are human beings. Therefore, my dear friends, you will agree with me that every human being, regardless of age, regardless of ability, status, gender, ethnicity, is to be treated with respect. What then is the most important human right? You might want to ask. I wouldn't want to venture that question because in different parts of the world, different rights have been considered as being a priority. I'll leave it to you to work that out. But I would ask you to answer the question, what is respect and dignity? These are simple words, but have you ever stopped to think of what really respect and dignity is? Would you agree with me that respect and dignity is a state, quality, or a manner worthy of esteem or respect and self-respect? In other words, their dignity in care. Therefore, what it means is the kind of care in any setting which supports and promotes and does not undermine a person's self-respect regardless of what the difference is. Care remains, the dignity in care remains the dignity in care wherever you are. What then is the theory of human rights? My dear friends, there are two theories. One is the interest theory and the other is the choice theory. The interest theory argues that the principal function of human rights is to protect and promote certain essential interests, while the will theory, or what you call the choice theory, attempts to establish the validity of human rights based on the unique human capacity for freedom, for the freedom of choice. So it is a familiar theme that again Immanuel Kant bequeathed to modern moral thought, the doctrine that all rational beings or persons have a dignity that makes them equally worthy of respect. So as a result, Immanuel Kant, the philosopher, often treated the dignity of persons as a species of merit, the dignity of the person as a species of merit, rather than anything persons have regardless of merit. In other words, you need not have merit in you to be respected because you are born with the species of merit that makes it incumbent that you be respected as a human being. My friends, an intimate link between human rights and human dignity is frequently noted in the literature. For example, if you take the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the ICCPR, what does it say? It states that the rights enumerated, quote, derive from the dignity of the human person, close quotes, with respect to other cultures. Just look at that. The ICCPR. Then we have Abdul Aziz Said, who was a great international lawyer, a Syrian-born philosopher, who says, Abdul Aziz Said says, quote, he says, in Islam, as in other religious traditions, human rights are concerned with the dignity of the individual, close quotes. So many authors, my dear friends, go so far as to treat human rights and human dignity as essentially equivalent concepts. However, it will be argued here that human rights presents only one path to the realization of human dignity, although there are indeed close connections between the two concepts. So therefore, I ask you to appreciate that there are conceptions of human dignity which do not imply human rights, and societies and institutions which aim to recognize human dignity entirely dependent of human rights. They don't even worry about human dignity. This view, which was once rather common, seems to be ignored or rejected in most of the recent literature specifically devoted to the topic of human rights and dignity. So the argument that human rights are not a Western discovery, that all societies have human rights notion, and that all societies cross-culturally and historically manifest conceptions of human rights is a common feature of the current discussion of human rights in a non-Western setting. I will argue, perhaps to the contrary, and perhaps you and I will both argue because we are the same ethos. To the contrary, that most non-Western cultural and political traditions lack not only, right, I would argue, and that is true, we will have to probably strike our breasts and probably concede this, that most of our non-Western cultural and political traditions lack not only the practice of human rights, but the very concept. Although we talk about it so much, we discuss it, we have colloquiums, we teach it, but look around us. Do we see it? As a matter of historical fact, the concept of human rights is an artifact of modern Western civilization, isn't it? It does not necessarily follow, however, that human rights are in any important sense arbitrary, wrong, misguided, or in need of basic rethinking. I don't think there is. On the contrary, human rights represents a distinctive approach to the problems of human dignity, which deserves to be fully and fairly evaluated, I say, on the merits, not on its parentage. My dear friends, this historical character of the concept must be taken seriously, I say, must be taken seriously. But more importantly, we must move beyond a limited genetic perspective to the important substantive issues raised by human rights. In this lecture, I am seeking to attempt to specify the special character of human rights, of the human rights approach to human dignity. To demonstrate just this, to demonstrate its historical uniqueness, and to begin and asking you to explore some of the issues that I raised. So, therefore, universal human rights theory holds, my dear friends, that human rights applies to everyone simply and by virtue of their being human. Nothing else, nothing more, nothing less. The most obvious challenge to universality, or the universality factor perhaps, comes from cultural relativism, which maintains that universal human rights, as I said at the beginning, are neo-imperialistic and culturally hegemonic. So, my dear friends, I think we have spoken, hence it is a naturally self-refuting theory that engages, as I told you earlier, universalism in its own rejection of this concept. I think we have spoken quite a bit on about universal human rights, its concept, its beginning, its ethos, and the very foundations of what it is structured upon. I hope this little discussion that we have had, we will have, and this I hope this lecture would lend itself to a greater understanding of what we are really doing in the field of human rights and in understanding this whole concept of human dignity. So, my dear friends, there we are. If there are any questions and you want to get into a discussion with me, I'm certainly free. I'll be happy to do that. I hope, as I said, that this would help you to rethink to this whole concept of human rights. I'm asking you not to treat it as just a subject to teach. I'm asking you not to treat it as just a subject to write a thesis or a PhD upon and file it and forget it and store it in the limbo of forgotten things. Remember that all this must translate itself into real-time action if we are going to make this home of ours, this planet, our countries, a place in which every citizen and every human being can live in peace, in the blossom of all the rights they're entitled to as human beings, and to live in peace and dignity and rise to new horizons of freedom and progress. Thank you very much for a patient hearing, and thank you very much for waiting until we got this lecture in place, notwithstanding the glitches we had with the technical aspects of it. Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you, Lordship, for giving enlightenment on human rights issues and more about the natural rights and the universal rights and how the flow of the rights came from natural rights, all those things, theories about those things.
Thank you.
This is a very good experience for us and also our faculty members coming from different places. I think, Mr. Dilip, do you have any questions to ask?
Yes, sir. We have two questions in the house right now.
Yes, you may read, and other people may put their questions on the chat box.
Okay, so sir, first question is by Ms. G. Vidya Sudha. She's asking, please enlighten us on China's behavior or communication or alertness towards the universe in spreading coronavirus with reference to the right to life, including health.
Right. Now, let me steer clear of the politics of it, right? I'm just asking you the question. I just want to play the devil's advocate with you. India has 1.35 billion people on its landmass. It has 1.39 million square kilometers for territory. I'm really asking the question, particularly in the context of the pandemic, of the world pandemic that we are facing, right? Irrespective from where it came and how it went, or how it will go. I'm just asking the question: don't we have? I'm just joining issue because lots of people ask me these questions. I'm just joining issue with you by asking you the question: don't we have enough on our own plates before we worry about China and its posturing? I'm just asking you the question. Seriously, all the problems that you have, perhaps in Hyderabad itself, or perhaps in Madhya Pradesh, or perhaps in all the 29 states in India. In other words, I'm saying, I'm only putting this in perspective. There is a biblical saying that before you take the speck out of the eyes of another person, please look into your own eyes. People in glass houses, they say should not be throwing stones. I'm asking you this question. Okay, I'll answer your question secondly. But what I'm saying is, you see, yesterday I did a lecture. Very soon, sovereignty, the polarization of people will come to a halt. Sovereignty and the polarization by people will come to a halt. I will read to you as to what the coronavirus will do to you. Now, if you just care to listen for 5 minutes to what I have got to say, you will see. I will just read to you what I said yesterday in a lecture. The comfort of being in the presence of others might be replaced with greater comfort of absence, especially with those we don't know, because now we are talking with people on the internet who are thousands and thousands of miles away. And we feel very safe from each other because we are thousands of miles away. Then the online contact will, of course, create a lot of connections as we communicate more often with people whom we don't know. Then the academics go to say, answer your question. You will then see a new kind of patriotism. When you will start to understand patriotism more as cultivating the health and life of your community, of your own community, rather than blowing up someone else's. It is just possible that the need for demilitarization and love of community will be one of the benefits to come out of this major debacle. There will be a decline in polarization. I say this in the context that given our current level of tension at every level of society, the pandemic scenario suggests the time is ripe to begin to promote constructive patterns in cultural and in the political discourse. There will come a serious attitude in our people that expertise matters. In other words, what they're saying is we will not have enough time to be worrying about other countries because we will have to start thinking of our neighbors. What are we doing today? Just think of it today. What we are doing today, we don't allow people to come beyond our doorstep, right? So all I'm saying is, let's try and learn a few lessons out of it, right? The Chinese, let's keep the Chinese where they are. I'm not for a moment holding a banner for the Chinese. No. All I'm saying is, it is time that there is a lot to be done in our own neighborhood. Look at the thousands who are walking on the streets on the main highway of Noida, which I saw on television recently. Walking, they don't know where they're going. Now, that's not a nice thing to see. So I'm saying, let's realign our. You see, as a global community, we deal with China, right? They're not doing, but I'm fairly sure they have a hell of a responsibility perhaps for not taking measures in time, and so on and so forth, right? But remember that before we condemn China, there are lots of things. Remember, what are the rules of natural justice? Audi alteram partem. They need to be heard. Let's hear what they have to say before we condemn them. The rule against bias. Now, these are not disjointed, disconnected principles. These are principles that affect our lives in every facet of human activity. So, to the young lady who asked that question, I'm only saying that the Chinese, certainly the way in which they dealt with it may not have been impeccable, may not have been textbook. For that matter, look at what the United States is doing. How many people have died there? Quite frankly, we in this part of the subcontinent have done very well compared to the Chinese or the United States or France or Italy for that matter. And we have done very well. Take India, considering its large population, it has done very well to contain the virus. Sri Lanka, of course, our problems are relatively small because our populations are small. But there are critiques even of what we are doing, which we think are right. Even here, the current discourse is that the government is not doing things which are right, which I totally disagree, and that's a political critique which is misplaced. But be that as it may, let's not, what I'm saying is let's not engage. The question is, we are asking legal questions. Who is liable? Who is at fault? That is not the way in which we need to look at it. We've got to be futuristic, they say. Remember the answer is futuristic. We will ask, what is it that we need to do? We need to be forward looking. So the liability principle is not the principle that must apply, but the question that we must be asking is what we should do. So I hope that actually helps you to kind of refocus on the thinking that we ought to probably adopt, right? I certainly would agree with you fundamentally that things could have been handled better. Is that by the government of China that would have made matters perhaps in hindsight easier for the global community to handle. All right? Okay.
So
With the
second
permission
question.
of the Honorable Justice, 1 minute, Dilip.
Yes.
With the permission of the Honorable Justice, Mr. Mohanji, I would
Yes.
like to add some more thing to here.
Yes.
The particular answer to this question.
Yes.
We are questioning about the China at present because of the pandemic.
Yes.
There are many things happened earlier, and many events took place. Many disasters came during that also. That time also, many times the human rights have been breached.
Yes.
So whenever we see the issue, we have to see it in a broader perspective.
Yes.
Perspective that's a event based,
Yes.
or we can see about the segment based, or what's the background for that particular part. So many things will be have to consider before we question whether human rights are properly managed or not, who are the responsible, who are the liable for that particular act or activities that we have to take care.
Yes.
Example, yesterday something happened in Vizag, gas is leaked, 7-8 people got death, and now
Okay.
immediately the government reacted for that by paying the compensation of 1 crore rupees per a family, and also
Yes.
they promised for this particular part.
Yes.
Wherever there is a disaster, automatically the government is under obligation to come and serve and help the people.
Quite
But
right.
sometimes there may be a possibility when there is a lot of natural calamities happen, and
Yes.
because of the hurricanes, because of the earthquakes, the people may not be able to reach that particular place. As a
Sure.
result, people suffer a lot of humanity issues.
Sure.
So under those circumstances, then who is responsible? We have to check ourselves and question ourselves who is responsible.
Well,
And
you're asking me a question which is a minefield, quite frankly. It includes many factors. You see, now your classically your question is wonderful. I must say. In other words, you are asking the question now. You see, in as much as we are now jealously guarding our territorial integrity, our sovereignty, and so on and so forth, we are now asking. You see, this is what happens when we start becoming global players. when we start becoming global players, when we, in other words, we are part, let's assume, of course, we are part of the global team. We are part of the United Nations organization. We are one of the 189 countries in in that organization. Now, in other words, what is the UN trying to do? Now, you are talking about let's take the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a common document ratified by all states that have subscribed to the United Nations. Now, we
That's
have
only the framework. That's a broader framework which are talking about.
quite right, quite right.
And
So,
we have to look into issues and it basis, each basis,
So
each
that's
one.
right. So that's right. So that is why we have all kinds of treaties. There are multiple treaties that sovereign states enter into with the global community, right? For to be able to be held responsible for a particular. Now let's take the nuclear anti-proliferation treaty between Iran and the United States. Now, there are definite obligations in those treaties where countries are held accountable for a particular. Now, for example, take this gas leak. Right? Now, there the gas leak, the government promptly came into focus and they promptly took action, promptly compensated, and so on and so forth. Right? So those things are there, but at a global level, let us issue for example, take the Warsaw Convention on aviation, on the travel by air, right? The travel by air, we have a global convention which regulates the entire the carriage by air. Now, into which number of states have contributed, and there is a global regime by which that where aviation is being controlled. Shipping, similarly, the maritime laws. So then we have the World Trade Organization, we have the International Labour Organization, we have the United Nations Human Rights Council. So now these are all bodies that can hold. Now, for example, at the next periodical review of the United Nations Human Rights Council, I am fairly sure China would come into a lot of criticism, and they'll be asked a million questions and be held responsible if that is the case, right? For not taking timely action with regard to the pandemic. So there are lots of organizations, even globally, that actually review the activities of states who are uh, uh, who are who are party to this entire global treaties that we are actually subscribing to. So I think that is the way around it. Of course, I do take the point that somebody has to be held accountable. Now, for example, in environmental law, we have this principle: the polluter pays. Right? The polluter pays. Right? There again, we have the big industrialized nations who are polluting the whole world. So we have said, okay, you pollute, you pay for it. So there are those principles. And so those are the principles we actually work with. We don't actually, we are in the international community, there is no naming and shaming that goes on, but we certainly hold people liable, quite rightly as you point out, and and in some situations they even ask them to compensate people for whatever damage that they have caused the environment or health or shipping or aviation or whatever that may be. Okay. Yes.
And let me sum up this particular point, what you're talking about. I can
Yes.
say that this particular human rights is nothing but a rights and obligation of a person, and a person standing or sitting neighbor to a person who is suffering,
Yes.
instead of a government alone. We have to
Yes.
think in a different ways, not only government liability. When we
Sure.
are going by way, when there is an accident, we have some obligation in before somebody comes, some government organization comes, or some ambulance comes and pick up. We have some obligations there. So we
Yes.
cannot just like relieve ourselves from giving a comment that who is responsible, who is not responsible for that.
Yeah.
Every human is responsible for the human rights of individuals who are residing behind you and besides you. This is a
Quite,
fundamental. This is a
quite,
natural one.
quite
In
true.
addition to this, what are the natural principles? What are natural principles as stuff, just like polluter pays? All those principles are stuff like different law. So
Yeah.
those things are automatically will follow after that.
Absolutely.
If you see,
You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right, Professor. Yesterday in my lecture, I finished off by reminding them of the neighbor principle in Lord Atkins' judgment in the Donahue and Stevenson case. You will all remember, the faculty they are seated there will remember, if you taught
Yes,
the
yes.
neighbor, right? Apply the neighbor principle and you have human rights there. In other
Yeah,
words,
that's what. Mm.
there is nothing as to the neighbor principle that Lord Atkin propounded in Donahue and Stevenson. If you look at it, it's a universal principle that captures all these rights, all this high-fangled, sophisticated stuff that we are talking of, simply because that principle says you can do anything you want, but be conscious it doesn't actually affect your neighbor. Then he asks the question, who is your neighbor? Your neighbor is the man whom you can actually foresee as being someone who might be affected by your acts or acts of omission. Now that's a lovely way of putting it. Of course, then you have the Bible which says, "Love thy neighbor as thyself." Don't do anything with to your neighbor that you wouldn't do for your do to yourself. That again produces human rights in its absolutely fine sense, isn't it? So
Yes,
there
sir.
we are. Yeah.
Humans
So
are not new. That's what I want to tell you. Humans are
yes,
age-old concepts and their discussions part of it.
sure.
Yesterday, with the permission of the our Honorable Justice Prakash Rao and other faculty members, if we are seeing every day in news, thousands of people are walking, migrant workers are walking miles and kilometers away. What kind of problem they are facing? Is
Exactly.
it their own? Is that their own sin? No, it is not their own sin. When the
Exactly.
company was when the company was working well, these people contributed for the benefit of those company, and the
Exactly.
owners you are reaped much amount out of that profits.
Were earning millions of crores. Yeah.
Millions. But when the issue has come, they have disowned these people.
Yeah. Exactly.
Though there is no disown, there is a law about the migrant workers and migrant liabilities. What kind
Sure.
of rules we are from? What kind of enforcement is coming? Migrant liabilities are also there with the governments, social
Yeah.
organizations, many
Yeah.
things. But if
Sure.
you see some of the villagers on the road when they are going, when these migrant workers are going, they're
I saw
calling
the
them, asking them to,
pictures.
they
I
are
saw the
asking
film.
to,
My heart bled. Quite frankly, when I saw that picture, my heart really bled because I have traveled on those very same roads, and those people and those poor people actually have. I see them working all over, and suddenly they are left alone. They have no one. There's no ownership for them. Luckily, the government actually does what it does, but that is certainly not good enough. I take your point that these people who employ these people must be held
and,
responsible
and
for
let me complete this, sir. The people who enjoy the benefit out of the migrants workers work hard work, they are not at all taking care, or they might have taken initially some care to them. But these people are left orphans on roads against the sun and the torching sunlight, torching hardships.
sure,
But if you
sure,
see on the roads, some of the villages in between, they are stopping these people who giving the buttermilk, giving the food, giving the water just like a gesture. That is
sure.
called the human right. That is the human right. They don't
Yeah,
have any obligation to anybody else. But the
of
human is having the obligation to the other human being. So they are exercising, they are showing their human rights to those people. This is what
exactly.
actually we need. We have to incorporate this kind of principles in our day-to-day part. But it's very, very difficult.
So that's why I said that. That's what I was saying. We talk of these very high principles, but when it comes to implementation, in its very simple sense, we are unable to do that. And you now will probably realize that the inalienability of human rights is
Yes.
another joke, just another notion. It
Mm.
is in pieces. Human rights the rights are in pieces, and we are trying very hard to put them back together. So it's in our hands to make that change and sensitize our students to make
Mm.
that change. That we have to tell our students that this is not only for you to pass your exams, but this is something to develop your minds and sensitize you to the human being in your neighbor, to understand that when we send them out to the world after educating them and after they graduate, that when they go out to the world, that there is a trust that has been placed on them by the community who has invested in them to uphold human rights and to look after their brothers and sisters who are vulnerable, who are less fortunate, and work for the community and for the country at large. That is the message I think I would ask faculty to try and give your prodigies who are studying under you. Give that message. It's much more than learning these books. If there are any other
And
questions that anyone wants to ask me,
sir,
I'll be
let me
happy to.
complete, sir, let me complete my comment and my what's called idea of that's running in my mind. Coming to the second side, that's the liability and the enforcement of the human rights. What kind of teeth our human rights commissions, national human rights commissions are having? Nothing. They don't have any kind of teeth. They're
Of
only
course.
the actually authorities find out this is the problem, this is the problem, and they will dictate and they will term so and so thing has been violated, something happened. But in reality, when the things enforce, they only advise, they only suggest. There is no strict enforcement authority at all with them.
Yes.
So
Yes.
this is another dark side of the human rights issues part of it.
Yes.
Now,
Of course.
I request Dilip Sharma to read a few other questions.
Please.
Sure,
Please.
sir. Your Lordship, the next question is on the same line of thought regarding the migrated laborers, that whether uh, the compensation in monetary terms will be appropriate remedy for the violation of their human rights.
Answer is no. Answer is flatly no. Compensation is one of the ways. What does compensate? Okay, we'll give him 5,000 rupees. What happens when he finishes that 5,000? Does his position in life improve? So, in other words, just paying off the problem doesn't solve the problem. We've got to address the source of the problem. Does that man have a place to live? Does he have sufficient food to eat? Does he have sufficient shelter? Does he breathe clean air? Does he drink clean water? So there you are. It's much more than compensation. Compensation certainly is a good thing. But how much of compensation can we give? So, in other words, it's very easy to give a person a meal a day. But is that the answer? How long can we give him every day, give him a meal? Isn't it better, for example, to turn him into a tailor, teach him a trade, something by which his dignity is developed by virtue of his own skills, where he can make a living for himself on a day-to-day basis? Isn't that better than giving him a lunch packet, for example? So there you are. Monetary compensation is a temporary. It's perhaps a iconic way of saying, well, I hope this will actually solve your problems, but it doesn't. We know that. We know that for sure, because what's the value of that 5,000 rupees? How much? What's the buying power of that legal tender? As the professor was pleased to observe, we saw the thousands that were walking on Greater Noida towards UP. What happens now? Would you really think that 100 rupees given to that man would have made a difference? No,
It will not happen.
it didn't happen. Right? It won't. So there you are. Money, if we think we can, in other words, don't treat this as a contract where we can pay. In other words, we are dealing with human beings like chattels, merchandise, buy, sell, move, pay for it. Oh, he's done some work for me. Here is 100 rupees and go off. Right? No. There's something more to it. What we are trying to develop, I'm not saying that we can probably be absolutely perfect in what we are doing, but there is much more in a human relationship than perhaps just giving money. Money doesn't, I wish money could have bought us the happiness that we're all, the mirage of happiness that we're all chasing. We know that doesn't work like that, isn't it? For that matter, all the money in the world doesn't assure us tomorrow, for example. So there you are. That is the supreme irony of creation, right? That tomorrow is not assured for any one of us. So that being the case, surely monetary compensation is of the least consequences. Although that's a easy, a standard, a very so kind of the social contract would say, well, here is some compensation and do as much as you can. God bless you. That's what you're saying, right? But it
Mr.
doesn't go
Dilip,
beyond.
Mr. Dilip, any more questions?
Yes, sir, we have few. So, sir, the
Please.
next question is
Yes.
Ms. Rajashri is asking, while highlighting from our current discussion, that universalization of human rights remain a big issue as feminists, Marxists, and conservatives or the third world perceptions are divergent. So she's asking that, in your opinion, do you think that the human rights are Eurocentric?
No.
There you are. You see, it has the color of being Eurocentric, but it is not Eurocentric. Okay, it certainly has the color of it.
Mm.
After all, remember that these things were written post Universal Declaration of Human Rights after the Second World War, right? And mind you, this was written after they dropped two nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki that completely kind of destroyed those two cities and killed millions. After they bombed Dresden in Germany to the ground and creating enough havoc in the world, then they sat down to work out a universal declaration of human rights, right? That sprung from their own experience, right? That sprung from their own experience. Having done that, of course, by that time they were great seafarers. They had ventured, they were traversing uncharted, they were going on uncharted seas. They landed in our shores, right? They started the East India Company in India. They ruled Sri Lanka by the same regime, and they superimposed all their values on us. And we, of course, there were good. There was a good side to it, and there was a not very good side to it. So there you are. Whether we like it or not, there is a Eurocentric kind of angle to it, certainly. But all I'm saying is, until we find something better, we don't have to worry about it too much because they're not too bad, except in its interpretation, except in its adaptation. And mind you, we haven't found anything better. No, have we? Have we found anything better? The answer is no. So until we find something better, let's try and work within this whole system, which looks highly workable. It looks highly workable, except that it's certainly smaller jurisdictions like, for example, Sri Lanka, and perhaps this part of the world, this kind of those lofty methods of living, those lofty ideals, how people should live, might be what you're saying is that it is a luxury, which is actually true. So, really, what we need to do is empowerment, development, education. I think without education, human rights means nothing. Education. You will see that the worst violations of human rights comes from those areas of the society that has no education, where they are illiterate, the level of education is very low. That is where the most violations come from. You will see that.
Mr. Dilip, any more questions?
Yes, sir.
Yep.
Mr. Kannan is asking that human right violation is not same in regard to different sections of the population. In family situation, there is a violation of human right, for example, domestic violence, dowry torture, at workplace like sexual harassment. So on the basis of caste, there is a violation. So is there any holistic approach to study all these phenomena?
Mr.
Yes,
Khanna? Yes, sir.
yes, there is. There are holistic studies, but there again, you see, you've got to again remember this, that let's say domestic violence, right? Let's say domestic disputes. Domestic disputes in our part of the world is in a completely different setting. What I mean is, our families, we are paternalistic. We work within the what we call is the patria potestas or the paterfamilias, right? We are highly domesticated. We have extended families. Our cultural values are different. Now, that doesn't necessarily actually work in the United States. or in England, or perhaps in the Soviet, in the Russian Federation, or in Germany. So the whole approach is different. For example, let's take the grounds for divorce in India and in Sri Lanka. It's still fault based. In England, that's no more the case. It's not fault based. It is just on the breakdown of the marriage. So there you are. So there is certainly the human rights angle can be applied to even those personal laws like the matrimonial laws, and there is certainly a global approach to try and strike a norm which is globally acceptable.
Yeah.
But I'm not too sure whether that can actually be
Yeah.
effectively work in our own cultures. Yeah.
Mr. Dilip, there will be only one remedy for each problem. There should not be multiple remedies for one each problems. You have
Right,
taken the
sir.
domestic violence at this particular part, so this law will be applicable, not that law. Any more questions you have?
Sir, we have a long list of questions.
Huh?
Yeah.
List of questions.
Yes,
Sure.
sir.
Please quick, because we are running out of time.
Okay.
How many
So,
questions you have? 3, 4?
sir, we have approximately 4-5 questions.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ask.
speed,
So, sir,
speed,
Mr.
speed up.
Rakesh is asking, will there be a hierarchy
Don't
coming
talk.
into role when we consider human rights on weaker section welfare?
Can you speak a little slowly?
Just a second, sir.
हम लोग
There
कौन सी
are
गाड़ी की?
multiple voices. Mute people. And yes, sir. So the question is,
Okay.
will there be a hierarchy coming into
Yeah.
role when we consider human rights on weaker section welfare?
I can't quite hear the words, the first few words of
In the current scenario,
yeah. Just
will there
slowly,
be a
slowly.
in the
Okay.
current scenario, will there be a hierarchy coming into role when we
Yeah.
consider human rights on weaker section welfare?
Question
What
is
coming into rule? What?
hierarchy. Hierarchy of the officers, officials.
Okay. Okay. But the hierarchy of the officials will come into.
Let's
Say
do
When we
again.
are
Will come
talking
into.
about weaker section of people.
When we are talking about.
The weaker section
Sorry?
of people.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. Okay. The hierarchy. Okay. Whether whether that will that'll be a different rule for them, is it? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah,
Sir,
but
I
the
think
question is, will there be a hierarchy coming into role when we consider human rights on a weaker section welfare?
No.
My dear Kannan, weaker section welfare is different from the protection of the human rights.
Yeah.
Welfare is totally different from the human rights. Please consider that. Number one.
Exactly.
When we talk about when you are talking about the welfare, the different kinds of hierarchy will come. When you're talking about the human rights, other hierarchy will come.
Yeah.
Number third, for human rights, there is no question of whether weaker section or any bigger
That's
section or rich section. It is
exactly.
equally applicable to everyone equally. So this
Equality
kind
before
of
the law.
equally,
Equality,
yes.
equality before the law. Equality
So
before the law is fundamental.
there is
Remember
no,
the rule.
yeah,
Yeah.
there is no
Remember
question
this.
of any separate for that. Okay.
Remember this fundamental rule, which I used to always tell my judges: equals cannot be treated unequally, and unequals can't be treated equally.
Yes, that is the
That is the rule. Equals cannot be treated unequally, and unequals cannot be treated equally. Now, having said that, you will ask me the question, is there room for discrimination? The answer is yes, you can discriminate provided there is a rationale, there is an intelligent rationale for the difference. In other words, there is no rule against discrimination. You can discriminate so long as there is an intelligible rationale for the differentia. Understand? So that is the rule. So that is how there is intelligible rationale. That's how you've got your provisions in the Constitution itself, where we do affirmative action. That's the rationale. So equals cannot be treated equals can't be treated unequally. Neither can you treat unequals equally. And if you want to distinguish one from the other, you must have an intelligible rationale for the discrimination. Okay?
Another question is, under the present position of the COVID-19, are there any constrained enjoyment of human rights?
Are there any? Yes, of course. Constraints.
Constraints.
Yes, of course. Look at the freedom of movement. Look at the freedom of education. It's completely upset, isn't it? In other words, the lecture I did yesterday for Sharda was on this topic of the position of human liberties, right? In the context of community, your duties towards the community. So human rights, certainly some of our human rights, and now some would certainly get compromised. No, but that's not the way to look at it. The compromising of that right comes voluntarily from us. It's not something the government is pouring down your throat. The government will say, well, look, don't go to Bihar because don't go on holiday to Bihar if you want to go to Bihar. Don't go there because there is a flu. Okay. Now, you have to impose a restraint on your own movement. So, in other words, your freedom to go is curtailed by your own voluntary choice to curtail that freedom for yourself without being having to be told, right? Right? If you don't, see, let's assume that you recklessly. In other words, healthcare will at some point, health of the greater health of the community will at some point take over, right? Will superimpose itself on your individual right of freedom of movement. Similarly, education. Now these days all our students are at home. Our little children don't go to school. Now there we have a right to education, but we are doing everything else rather other than being able to physically attend the university or to school. So there is an impact on our right, but that is something that we are doing temporarily for the greater good of the community in which you and I both are active participants. So that is the way to look at it. Okay.
There are some other questions mostly on migrant workers and
Yes.
livelihood and concessions or what are the help are those given.
Sure.
May I bring to your attention, there is a separate law for the migrant workers' rights protection.
Okay.
So those laws will be it can be no here in addition to the human rights. It is
Okay.
when there is an emergency, when there is a pandemic, it is a responsibility of the government and also other organizations to
Yes.
come and help them. So these are the
Yes.
different kinds of the questions on similar kind of things.
Sure.
Protect the human is also like that.
Sure.
So let us now start the questions here.
Yes.
May I ask our Honorable Justice Prakash Rao Garu to highlight some of his feedback and also
Of
suggestions
course.
regarding
Yes.
this part of it.
Of course, I'll be
It will
delighted to hear.
yeah, it will be add value to our path.
Of course. Of course. Please.
Very nice of you. Thank you for the opportunity. My Lord,
Thank
may I?
you, Judge.
Good afternoon, my Lord. We have met in the ICFAI premises last time.
Yes. Yes, we did. I remember. I remember
Yeah.
you clearly right in front of me. We were having lunch.
So yes. To you and all the participants today, happy greetings on the Buddha Purnima, Lord Buddha's birthday today.
Oh, yes. We're celebrating Vesak here. Yes.
My Lord
Same.
was mentioning about the Buddha principles and certain aspects about the King Ashoka and all that. Therefore, I thought I should wish a greetings to all of you. There are a couple of ideas which I would like to share. Not the question of not asking the questions, but but something to think about certain aspects by the participants and also by my Lord.
Yes.
These human rights violations or enforcements to be considered from historical past events and impact on society sociologically. These are the two aspects which need to be considered for especially as long as we really seek to worry about and concern about individuals' rights. And second aspect which I thought would like to lay some thinking process to be on is my Lord, your Lordship knows about the two cases of Nirbhaya and Disha,
Yes.
girls who were raped. And Nirbhaya is a case of Delhi. Disha is case of Hyderabad.
Yes.
Nirbhaya had all the almost of that entire rigmarole of following up the human rights and ultimately delayed disposal, delayed execution, and delayed everything and delayed concern for those who were really rebelled. But also another contrast situation is about Disha case in the Hyderabad. The instant justice was done by encountering all the four accused. So these two cases stare at us and with a contrasting ramifications. So these things had to be by I request all the faculty members and also to be shared with the students and also by my lord consider merits of violation or enforcement keeping in view but keeping in view especially the Nirbhaya case but for the media. My lord may agree that you and the lordship and myself possibly would have acquitted those accused but for the media's exposure
Yes.
but some media's exposure. So therefore, these are all aspects. How far and to what extent human rights will have a play or can have a play in the future also. For the,
Exactly.
then another third aspect which I thought I should share with you. It is a very typical way of approach of mine. See, my human rights terminate with the end of my note, and your human right begins from the border of your note. So there is such a amp space, open space, not only space on the face of the earth, but also universal space, and which is such a open field for all sort of activities for or against the human rights violation. So, sir, may we, the person who are concerned with the law, with little expertise, and also and those all these faculty members who are sharing to make the students are tomorrow's citizens and contribute physiologically also from different walks of life. So, therefore, the approach has to be, should I say, that each case or each incident has to be a postmortem or an advanced surgical strike. So with these few things, I really thank the director Garu for giving me this wonderful opportunity, and also I was really overjoyed to see your lordship and listen to once again one very not only informative but also educational. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much, Judge. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Much nice listening to you. I hope we'll see each other again soon. Yes.
Sure.
At this juncture, already time is 6 o'clock now. Our scheduled time is almost over. People might be having other schedules after 6 o'clock as naturally. And I don't want to extend this time by giving questions or answers. You may send your questions by chat or some kind of email to Mr. Dilip Sharma. We'll be taking care of that. If possible, we'll be answering those questions. At this
Thank you.
juncture, I express my sincere thanks to everyone who participated in this lively discussions part, all faculty members for different law schools of ICFI group and other law schools also, law colleges of Hyderabad and outside the Hyderabad. And it will be a privilege for us to have Mr. Mohan Pir, just Honorable Justice Mr. Mohan Pir is with us. He has done wonderful work with us, and also is a almost not a Sri Lankan, but is a though he's a Sri Lankan judge, he is a part of India. We can give a Indian citizenship immediately without any kind of questions or without kinds of immigration applications. He is a regular visitor to so many colleges here. He is well versed with the law of India or Indian law. So I thank you very much, sir, once again. I thank Hemalata Garu, Pratap Reddy Garu, and Mr. Dilip Sharma, Arun, all other people who are doing wonderful job during this. Tomorrow we have one more program at same time 4 o'clock. This time our Honorable Justice Prakash Rao will be addressing the gathering on electronic evidence. And I think all of you have to come prepared to put a lot of questions to him. So let us have a lively technical discussions on the electronic evidence. Anvesha, you have to have at least 10-15 questions on your part. Okay? Let us take this. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very
Mohanji.
much. Namaskar.
We are going. Namaskar, sir. We are closing this. Sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Every
Thank you,
one of
sir.
you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All the
Thank
best.
you, sir. Thank
Thank
you.
you very much, sir.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Sir, I'm happy to share that today we were having members from different South Asian countries, including Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. It's a good achievement, I think.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Mm.
Thank you, Dilip.
So yeah, good number.
Yes, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
And inform all the
Yes, sir.
participants that we are going to give e-certificate by 1 week after this particular program is over. Participation
sure, sir.
certificate will be given online. Online certificate will be given.
Okay, sure, sir. I will inform. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you. Thank you to you all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, Dilip.